Good afternoon, and thank you for tuning into another episode of our Friday show. Steph, the show has been going on for a long time now. We used to introduce like, welcome to episode 5, welcome to episode 6. I don't even know what episode we're on anymore. We've been doing this for so long. I am Dave Kluge, and I'm here with Steffi Smalls, and we've got the godfather of Dynasty and co-owner of DLF with us today, Ryan McDowell. Ryan, I know that you've always got a million things going on and you are staying busy right now with Scott Fishbowl kicking off, but why don't you let us know what you're working on right now and let everyone know where they can find you on social media?
Oh my gosh, it is. Yeah, it's such a busy time for me, but a lot of fun as always. First of all, thanks for having me on the show, guys. Excited to be on here with you all. You can find me on Twitter at RyanMC23. You can find all of my football work at dynastyleaguefootball.com. Yeah, you mentioned Scott Fishbowl. We've kind of got that in the rearview mirror. You know, once we get through the drafts and Scott and I make sure everybody has logged in and is actually going to participate, it's we're kind of past the hard part. So that feels like I can check that box. But there's so much going on. Obviously, we're looking at training camp in the very near future. That's exciting. Like on a personal note, I'm a teacher, so we've got school starting in less than a month. I'm an assistant cross country coach, so I've got that kicking off next week. It feels like all the worlds are converging and things are really happening for me.
Yeah, so the hard part is over with Scott Fishbowl.
Yes.
And the next speed bump you're going to have is when Tim Tebow comes in as the red zone quarterback for the Jaguars, and we've got to figure out his positional availability. That'll be the next big thing that you guys will have to deal with over there. And then I've also included, as always, with Steph Smalls. I don't know, do I call you Steph Smalls now or Steffi Smalls? I know you changed your name on Twitter. It's kind of been this thing for a long time, and you finally changed it.
I'm like stuck in this world of like branding myself with this stage name that if anyone ever called me Steffi in public, like my family would laugh at you, my friends would laugh at you. I cringe when people say it. So I thought if I casually change at least my name, that maybe people stop addressing me as Steffi because it's just not a name.
Well, we are thrilled to have you on once again, Stephanie. You're back. You're good to go. But let's go ahead and dive right in. We've got a lot of great questions today. And what I want to start off with is that people have played keeper leagues for a long time. I mean, my grandpa was playing keeper leagues back in the day.
Yeah.
And you were the first to scale up to Dynasty and kind of make it one of the more standard formats out there. So now you're a part of DLF. And I just want to know, what was your vision for DLF when you were asked to join as a co-owner over there?
Yeah, it's really kind of been a long journey. I think one thing that is kind of unique with my situation is my first fantasy league that I played in was a dynasty league. So
your first one?
My first one, yes. Of course, so many obviously start with redraft, whether it's a home league or a college buddy league, work league, whatever it might be. My first experience with playing fantasy football was a dynasty league. So that's kind of all I've known from the start, which I think has had a big impact on, on this road that I've traveled here. But as I started playing dynasty, I was always just the most active player in my leagues. That's probably a story that a lot of us could tell. And then I joined DLF. It's been almost 10 years ago now that they brought me on as a writer and just kind of climbed the ladder. And it was a similar story. I was one of the most active writers, churning out a ton of content, and that turned into podcast and so many other things. But basically, when I joined DLF as a partner, that was just about 2 years ago now. Really just wanted to continue to grow DLF, continue to grow the dynasty game as a whole. I mean, when we started the DLF Dynasty podcast almost 10 years ago, we were actually the first dynasty specific podcast out there, which would sound crazy right now because there's
and how long ago was that?
That was almost 10 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it was, I was not actually one of the first co-hosts. They brought me in later. So I don't know. I can't remember the exact year, but it's been a while now. But anyway, when we started the podcast, we were the only one at the time, and now there's dozens. So I think as Dynasty grows, that's good for us specifically. It's good for all of the other Dynasty content producers out there.
Well, I think you're selling it a little bit short when you say that there are dozens of Dynasty podcasts out there. I'd scale up. I'd say that there's probably closer to hundreds.
That is true. Yeah,
it's something now where I'm working at Football Guys, and we get so many Dynasty mailbag questions in.
Yeah,
and I assume that with Football Guys, being a little bit of an older crowd, and I thought it was going to be more redraft forward, but it seems like everyone is starting to dip their toes into Dynasty. I've got 2 home leagues with 2 different friend groups, and a few of those guys had expressed some interest in doing Dynasty league. So I kind of cherry picked guys from each league and put them together into one Dynasty league, and they're loving it. Like people are finally starting to realize how fun this is, and it's been awesome to see it grow. You've done a lot of other interesting leagues though, outside of just Dynasty, and one that you're talking about right now that I've heard a little bit about is the Contract Chaos League. What exactly is that? Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, that's another unique one. I used to write this article series for DLF called "Keeping Dynasty Weird." Kind of playing off the whole. I guess it's Austin, Texas. I think that started with, but really just writing about unique dynasty leagues that were out there, and this one would definitely fit with this. I can't take too much credit for this. It was actually my buddy and my co-host Dan Meidler's idea, and I'm just kind of helping pilot that ship. But Contract Chaos, Dan and I have both played in auction dynasty leagues and contract dynasty leagues for a while. And typically you can set those contracts when you get a player on your team anywhere between 1 and 4 years. So Dan's idea is, what if we have each copy of a player, let's say Lamar Jackson, we've got 4 Lamar Jacksons, a 1 year, a 2, a 3, and a 4. So that's kind of where the Contract Chaos comes in. So we're going to have 4 copies of every single player, one copy with each contract year. So if you've got that 1 year Lamar Jackson, after this year, you're losing him. He's going back into the free agency pool. And that's the other big advantage, I think, of this league. You're basically doing a startup auction every single year because all of those 1 year players are going to be available next off season. So if you miss out on the guy you want, you'll be able to get him maybe again next year. So it should be fun. We're about to kick off that league next week, I think.
So how do you think of stuff like this? Like, that is such a cool idea, and like I could see that literally becoming like the norm within the next decade. Like, I could
Dave, we think we're creative with our Chaos League. Like, this is a whole nother level. Here we think we are with our rules. This is totally different.
Yeah, and this is something where I could see it just scaling up so quickly. Like, this is something where people like it's like almost that perfect blend of redraft and dynasty. So where did you come up with this idea? Is this just just a shower thought that you have randomly, or are you sitting around drinking beer with some friends? Like, where does this come from?
Yeah, again, that one specifically is almost all Dan Meidler's idea. So I won't take his credit on that one. But I've had a few, and there's a few of us. Scott Fish is certainly one of them. Who John Bosch is another, who just try to come up with these unique league ideas. Nathan Powell as well, I know, has come up with some of those leagues that would fit in that Keeping Dynasty Weird series. So really, I mean, you love Dynasty so much, you love the format, but you still always look for ways to tinker, ways to make it more fun, make it more challenging, whatever the case may be. Like, you join your first Dynasty league, and if you're like me, you fall in love and you want more, but now you just have 10 Dynasty leagues that are all kind of the same. So that's where the need for change comes in.
Yeah. So not everything can go well though. So there's got to be ideas that you have had that did not work out as well. What is an example of one of those ideas that didn't, went a little bit sour?
Yeah,
a little too weird.
It got a little too chaotic.
A couple come to mind for sure. So, if guys, gosh, you all are, I feel like I'm talking to my students here because you're both so much younger than me, but before you guys were around, before you guys were active on Twitter.
Back in my day. No, I'm
right,
kidding.
right. Back in the old days.
I'm kidding with you.
Hey, I wish it were. I wish that were wrong, but no, probably 5 or 6 years ago, maybe more than that. There was such a debate, and there still kind of is. But basically, a kind of a dynasty debate on youth versus those established veterans, right? And there was almost Scott knows what's coming. He's right.
Scott Fish, friend of the show.
That's right. And he knew exactly what I was going to say. So there was this debate, though, basically, like, should you build your teams around youth? Can you rely on those young players, rookies, whatever, early, or should you try to win now? And of course, I came up with the productive struggle idea, an article, and that kind of took off. But that was, I mean, it was also, ridiculed by many. Like, I'm not wasting a year. I'm not going to throw away a year or whatever. So, but I came up with an idea called the Boys to Men League, which Scott just mentioned there. And I came up with some ages that were kind of, I guess, I don't know, separating young versus old. So if you were a young team, you could only have players that were below that age. And we had one for each position. So it wasn't the same, a younger quarterback and a younger running back are not necessarily the same age. So we had 6 young teams, we had 6 old teams, and the young teams dominated. And that league did not last long because the old teams faded away very quickly. So I was on the young side. I felt like my point maybe not got fully was not fully proven, but I won that argument at least.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because you mentioned productive struggle. It's in your Twitter bio. You write an article about it. For anybody that isn't familiar with the term productive struggle, how would you just kind of sum that up for them?
Sure. So productive struggle, I mentioned I'm a teacher. It's actually an education term. And the idea behind it in our field is basically you're not always stepping in immediately when you see a student struggling on a problem or on a concept. You do have to sometimes let them struggle with the idea that basically they're going to figure it out themselves. And when I actually first heard that term, I zoned out. We were in this meeting. I kind of zoned out and immediately thought that's what I do. My teams are a productive struggle. And back then it was, it's called punting, or it was called, whatever, tanking or whatever. But I knew really that's what I did because I had a plan in mind, and it wasn't just a struggle. It wasn't a total punt, but it was a productive struggle. So I thought that was the perfect terminology for my strategy, and it kind of took off. And I mean, it's surreal that it's become kind of a common term now, or something that a lot of people do. But really the general idea is what a lot of people do, whether they know that terminology or not. They're building their dynasty teams around young players. They're stocking up on draft picks. They're avoiding older players. They're avoiding players who are going to lose value, and really willing to take their lumps early on in order to build that long-term dynasty.
So is that trading back in a draft to get future picks? Is it just, choosing the younger guy over the veteran? What are some, actionable ways that you can put this into effect when you're drafting?
I would say it's changed a little bit over the years. I first wrote the article in 2014, and part of the strategy then was simply avoiding running backs because a lot of dynasty players were investing in running backs, and honestly, there simply wasn't the talent at the position in 2014 that there is now. So that piece would change. In general, though, it's investing in young players, and really more than young players, it's investing in players you think can gain value. So it's not always a young versus old thing. It's, you certainly have to consider situations and, can that 26 or 27-year-old running back somehow gain value? I mean, usually not, right? But every once in a while we get those Mike Davis types, and we need to cash in. So it's not always young versus old, but I would say that's typically how it goes. But yeah, young players that can gain value, trading back in drafts, loading up on rookie picks for sure. And a lot of those things have become more challenging to do over the years because they have become such a normal strategy.
So if someone were to go into the Scott Fish Bowl, let's just say it's my first year, right? And I kind of went a little off the rails once I saw that a lot of these guys that everyone goes for went. I mean, everyone. It was a RB QB run. I may have created my own daycare with my roster. I have so many rookies. I don't know what happened. It just after pick 4, it was like, at this point, let's just go for it. I'm just going to take every rookie that I can and hope for the best. I mean, I took Waddle and Bateman back to back. One of them's got to do something, right? At that point, the other one could sit on the bench.
Yeah, I think what happens, we get so conditioned in the industry to like chase the upside and look for those young guys and the next big things that it ends up bleeding into our redraft and our Scott Fish Bowl lineups as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. Sometimes, I mean, we talk about rookie fever, rookie hype from a dynasty perspective, but I mean, you're totally right, Dave, that it does impact our redraft strategies. It's hard to separate those, right? I did look back though, as I was prepping for SFB, I looked back at the 15 finalists from last year and just what their drafts look like. And I didn't consider any waiver moves they made. I'm sure they all picked up James Robinson and that turned things around. But I just looked at their drafts. And one thing that stood out to me was I was surprised how many rookies they drafted. I think the average was 4.5 rookies that they drafted among the 22 players.
Over for my roster.
Right. So Steph, you're in good shape, maybe.
And I think that last year's rookie class was, I think we're going to look back at that as quite an outlier. I mean, we got like just when you're looking at the first like 6 rounds of fantasy drafts right now, there's like 25 players that just came out of last year's rookie class. So I feel like that is going to kind of skew our judgment a little bit now heading into 2021. And it's going to inflate the value of a lot of rookies that are hoping to get, this year's James Robinson or Justin Jefferson or Jonathan Taylor when there might not be any of those guys available. I mean, those could have been such outliers that we're not going to have any rookies that come near that. So it's looking at how that 2020 class is going to shape things is kind of cool to think about. And that kind of brings me to my next point. I saw a tweet and I thought that you tweeted it out, but I just couldn't find it somewhere when I was trying to prep for this. But I saw a tweet talking about how the year's average first round of a dynasty startup has the lowest age ever right now. So I'm wondering, do you think that has to do with this loaded 2020 class, or do you think that people are just starting to, value and factor age a little bit too much in their drafts?
Yeah, that was my tweet. I think it's a little bit of both, honestly. I mean, I talked about it earlier with the running back position, and I mean, it wasn't just 2014 was a down year for running backs. That was a long cycle. And if you look back at some of those ADPs from 2013, 14, 15, we actually were talking about it on the DLF podcast the other day. I think of the 12 players in the first round, 10 were wide receivers. It was 9 or 10 wide receivers. And, now you would totally flip that, and that would be 9 or 10 running backs going in the first round. So this change that we're finally at right now, where running backs are kind of back at the top of the mountain when it comes to value, it's been a long time coming, right? So it's all cyclical to me. What you talked about with the class of 2020 having that impact, you're totally right. But we saw the same thing in 2014 with Odell and Mike Evans and just so many great rookies from that class. We saw the same thing in 2017. That's kind of when the running back change started with McCaffrey and Dalvin Cook and Kamara and Leonard Fournette and so many of those players, Joe Mixon. So I think 2020 is just another one of those types of years where it's really going to create major waves in the dynasty and fantasy landscape. So to go back to your original question, I think that's part of it. We've just got so many good players from last year's class, and obviously a year into the league, they're going to be young. They're going to be young still. So fantasy players, dynasty players want those guys. But I think it's also it's probably an overcorrection when you look at guys like DeAndre Hopkins that were first rounders just a little over a year ago, and now you can grab those guys in the third or fourth round, and he's 28, so he's old.
It is kind of crazy. I mean, I'm relatively new to Dynasty. I've just been playing for a couple of years now, and I didn't really value age nearly as much as people, in the industry do. And then once I started getting in these industry drafts, it blew my mind how, guys that are 27, 28 years old, people are acting like they're dead, and they just keep free falling in these startup drafts. One other quick question I have. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just say big picture. I think that's still a relatively new thing for everybody. So like I started playing in like 03 or 04 maybe. But I remember doing a startup with Sigmund Bloom and Matt Waldman, a lot of these guys, these OGs. And I had the first pick. I took LaDainian Tomlinson. And I mean, that was an easy pick at that point. I think this was 05 or 06 maybe. And I looked back, he was 28 years old at the time. Wow. When I drafted him 101 in a dynasty startup. And I mean, you would be laughed at if you made that kind of pick now, right? I mean, McCaffrey is, I don't even know if he's 26 now.
No,
and there's
25.
already, and
people are already talking about the fall off.
Right. So, I mean, part of that we have to take responsibility for as dynasty players, but part of that's on the NFL too. Like the NFL has changed. There's very, very few 28-year-old starting running backs out there anymore. So the NFL changes and then we change as a result of that. But usually that's an overcorrection on our part, I think.
So I also wish we picked a different age because I turned 28 at the day of the expo. And it's like, yeah, he's old. He's 28. Okay, Ryan, I'm having a hard time like coming to terms with that a little bit. You're not making it any better.
You're hardly worth a second round rookie pick at this point.
Yeah. So I'm going to go off topic here a little bit. I am in way too many dynasty leagues. I've gone off the rails.
I love it.
This season, we're not going to disclose how many, but I have definitely, Dave had to cut me off. I joke around. I need my permission slip signed by Dave if I'm joining another one. But how do you manage, having as many leagues as you do? Because I can imagine that you are in the same boat as me.
Yeah, I've actually tried to cut back more the past couple years versus adding. It's always the temptation when you get an invitation to join a new league, especially if it is one of these new formats or if it's playing against people you've never had the chance to play against before. All those things are always tempting. One thing I've done more recently is partnered with a friend to co-own or co-manage these teams. So that's been a huge piece of it. Not just kind of lightening the burden of managing the team, but also exchanging strategies and having those conversations about who we're going to draft or trade offers to make or things like that. So the past couple of years, that's been one way I've kind of tried to find that balance.
I think I need co-owners. I think you're onto something. Now I'm having ideas are running in my head. I'm like, I think we can run with this. So don't be surprised if I make a tweet that's like, who wants to co-own half of my leagues?
Be careful. You'll get some takers. You've got to seek out just the right person.
So I know that you don't subscribe to any specific draft strategy. I've seen enough mock drafts where you go with the flow and whatever falls to you kind of go with, but at some point in a draft you've got your first couple picks and then you kind of have to develop your strategy around there. So I'm wondering, with all the leagues that you're in, which lineups do you like the best? Like what draft strategy would you say turns out your favorite lineups?
I still think a lot of those productive struggle ideals work as far as finding those players who are on the rise related to their value, because if they're gaining value, it's likely for a reason, right? They're producing. So I just try to I'm avoiding players who I don't think can gain value. So, right now, Travis Kelce is a second rounder in dynasty startups. And Of course, we think he's going to smash again in 2021, but there's no way I'm taking him in the second round. Like, he cannot gain value, and honestly, probably can't even maintain that value for the next year. Stephon Diggs, same thing. And no, he's not old, but he can't gain value. So guys like that, I'm not taking. That usually leads me to the 21, 22, 23-year-old players. And not only is the average age for the first round of ADP the lowest it's ever been, but the average age for top 12 scores across all 4 positions continues to go down as well year over year. So that's a big piece of it.
Really? That's shocking. I wasn't aware of that. Now there seems to be, I don't know if divisiveness is the right word, but there's a lot of people that say like you should be playing for the long game and thinking as far ahead as you can. And then you've got other people in the dynasty community that say, I'm not looking past 2 years. And I understand the argument for both sides, but I'm wondering, how do you feel about this sort of divisiveness? Which side of the fence would you say on? Like, are you looking 2 years in advance, or are you trying to think as far ahead as possible?
That's a tough one. I mean, some would say, a lot of people would say they have a 3-year plan. Some would even say longer than that, which I think is crazy. I went back and kind of tested this idea at one point, and it's been a little while now, but I looked at a startup at the time that I had done 3 years prior, and I looked at every single player that was drafted by every team. And it was something like 75% of the players were not on those teams anymore, whether they had been traded or dropped or whatever the case. Like, once you get that player on your team, you're probably not going to have him that long, right? A trade offer is going to come, or he stinks or he retires or whatever, and he's gone from your team. So to act like you have to, like you're marrying these players because they're on your roster is just crazy. I mean, the picks are still important because you want players who are going to gain value or maintain their value. That facilitates those trades and hopefully keeps you in contention. But really thinking more than a couple of years ahead is crazy to me.
I think when it gets frustrating too, and I think Dave and I, this is one of the things that we definitely agree on, is like, if you go into a startup draft, right, and it's like you're invested into this, even if you say 3 years, but then you have the guy that comes in, we won't name names, so all good. But like, you're throwing first round picks away for 22, 23, 24, when you literally know you have no intention of being in the league, then it's like, just play redraft. So that's the only time that I'm like, why are we in this startup draft and you're giving away picks? So you're obviously in win now mode, which is cool. I'm all with it. But if your intention is to dump the team the next year, then maybe we should reel it back a little bit and send our intentions towards redraft.
Yeah, that's definitely frustrating. And kind of along those same lines, you have to think about the life of the league. And that's tough to consider, right? Because anytime we join a new league, we think it's, we think it's for the long term. But the numbers I've seen on average length or life of a dynasty league, it's kind of like the average length of a NFL player's career. We think about Tom Brady or Peyton Manning or Frank Gore or whoever, but really they're mostly like a year and a half or something like that. So dynasty leagues are kind of like that too. If you're joining a random league from Twitter or from a message board or something, it's hard to use a productive struggle. By the time you're ready to compete, the league may be dead.
Right. So let me add, do you have any of those Tom Brady, Frank Gore leagues? Like, do you have any leagues that have been going for 15 or 20 years now? I mean, I don't know anybody that has, but if anybody does, it's got to be you.
Yeah. So I started some leagues called hyperactive leagues in 2006. That's the one I was referencing that I drafted Tom.
You have to start trademarking things, because I'm starting to notice like people laugh at me. I don't have as cool of things to trademark, like geese and journey is not that cool, but like the things you have going on are actually awesome. So you may have to look into that. I
need to. It's too late for some of them maybe, but I have seen other people use hyperactive leagues for sure, and that that's fine. Whatever. but yeah, so I started these hyperactive leagues in 2016, and they were really ended up kind of being pro-am leagues because there were a lot of fantasy writers. I mentioned Bloom and guys like that. Mike Clay was in those leagues, and Chad Parsons and Matt Waldman. I don't know, a lot of people, and a lot of just, I wouldn't say fans, but just your average dynasty players in those as well. So those actually closed those at the end of this past season, and I mean, really, it was just partly kind of like a time management thing for me. At that point, I think I was running. I don't know, 12 or 15 dynasty leagues, plus everything else going on, DLF and podcast and school and family. So that just kind of honestly became like the lowest priority at the time. And they were also, I mean, they were single quarterback. They were a lot of the things that have become more popular over the years. They did not have those features. So they just kind of grew out of favor basically, but those were definitely my longest running leagues, but those are gone now. RIP.
And you said 2000, what year did you start those?
I think that was 2006, I believe.
Awesome. All right. Wow. That's quite a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is Scott Fishbowl season. Is there any chance ever, possibly, just a slim chance that this turns into some kind of dynasty thing? Rather than being this annual situation.
I see Ryan smirking. I'm thinking this is probably a conversation that's happened in the past.
This is the guy that comes up with crazy leagues, and he's going to sit here and try and tell me that they haven't talked about it.
Oh yeah, I mean, Scott is as diehard dynasty as I am, if not more. I mean, Scott created Devi, right? Like he's credited with coming up with Devi leagues, and that's kind of a whole subset of dynasty in itself. So I can't say it hasn't been discussed, but I mean, like I said, once we can get past everybody, all 1,900 plus people making their first round pick, actually showing up and logging in and making it to the draft, like it's just a huge relief. And now the next thing is making sure everybody sets their lineup in week one. So, I mean, honestly, it's tough enough to like commission a league with 11 other people and making sure that they're active and engaged and whatever. But to do it for 1,900 long-term, like year to year, I don't know. I don't know if it'll ever be a dynasty league, but I mean, if anybody can do it, it's Scott.
Yeah, I mean, I could see it in the future, like some dynasty satellites, some ways to get it happening, one way or another. And obviously, we had Scott on the show a while ago, and just the way that you guys are able to innovate and change and just make things different is what makes this industry so fresh and fun. Because if everybody was still just playing in standard scoring, single QB redraft leagues, I don't know if there would be the market for fantasy football that there is now. Yeah. I mean, people get bored of it over time, and even my league, nothing near what I'm doing, but I've been commissioning my hometown league for 11 years since high school. And what we do is we add one rule every single year, and it's small, it's another flex. It's, half a point per reception, something like that. But, just keeping it fresh year over year is what makes fantasy football so fun, or it would get a little bit boring.
Yeah, you're totally right. And Scott and I co-host the Commission Impossible podcast, and every week we get emails from listeners who have come up with another new idea on how to play Dynasty. And a lot of times it's things we've heard before, or maybe even things we've thought of ourselves before. But there's also new ideas coming every single time, every single week, both for redraft and dynasty. So it used to feel like kind of a lonely world. Like it was just Scott and I and a few others who were coming up with these weird leagues, and now it's growing. And just as dynasty, as fantasy grows, these weird leagues are growing too, which is a great thing.
Well, it's funny. I mean, it's very obvious that, your brand is built around dynasty. Obviously, that's what we're talking about on this show. And I had a poll that I dropped the other day where I said, what's your favorite type of fantasy football to play, and it was redraft, dynasty, DFS, and best ball. And redraft had a lead, and then all of a sudden it just flipped, and dynasty started going crazy. And I was like, "What's going on here?" And I realized that you had retweeted it, and as soon as you retweeted it, dynasty just completely took over the poll from there on out. So obviously, the people that follow you are big into dynasty as well, and it's cool to see it grow, because a couple of years ago I didn't even know what a dynasty league was. So I got to ask you though, are you in any redraft leagues at this point, or is it 100%? I mean, besides Scott Fishbowl, are you in any other redraft leagues?
Yeah, obviously, Scott Fishbowl. I just joined a new league. A couple guys on Twitter, Jeff Greenwood and Brandon Brown, put this league together. It is a redraft league, and it's for parents of special needs kiddos. And I talk about my son Grayson, who has Down syndrome. I talk about him on Twitter, so that's certainly not like an off limits topic or anything like that. He's been, of course, great and a blessing for our family. But yeah, so we decided to, or actually they decided to put this league together, and were kind enough to invite me. And we didn't even know what the league was going to be at that point. We really just said, let's get together and have this line of communication, whether it's stories we want to tell or questions we need to ask or just support we want to give each other. But ultimately it turned out that it was going to be a redraft league, which was fine with me. So we just wrapped up that draft as well. And then I'll just do a couple of others, preferably best ball, because I mean, my mind is certainly focused on those dynasty teams that are a little higher on the priority list. But if I'm asked to do a best ball redraft league, I'm always up for that.
All right,
so
good to know.
I will comment quickly.
Yeah.
Something that people don't. So I double majored in special education, something that's very near and dear to my heart. I did a lot of research for years, and spent a lot of time with kids with autism. So I will comment on that, and I love how open you are about it. And I think that I applaud you for that. And that's one of the things that drew me to your account, because I like when people are able to be open about things, because it's very easy to have accounts that you don't share parts of your real life. So I applaud you for that.
Nice. Yeah. Grayson's pretty fun.
And I think that that's one thing that, just being authentic on Twitter, we talk about this on the show all the time. So many people are try to be, calculated in what they do, and try so hard to just gain followers, and everything is so methodical. And really the people that have the most success in this space are the people that are just genuinely themselves and sharing things about their personal life and their family and their struggles and whatever it may be. And having that authentic, just being authentic on Twitter goes a long, long way. And you absolutely embody that, Ryan.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, Twitter for me, like I've heard other people say this, and I guess it can go either way. Like I love Twitter. I love it. And I mean, I've formed a lot of great friendships strictly from Twitter. People that I would not know otherwise, that I talk with all the time, or that I've gotten to meet up with in real life. So, initially it was, let's focus on football and let's build this and whatever. But, in the end, a lot of these people that I follow or that follow me are my friends. So if I want to share something about Grayson, or if I want to talk about a movie I saw or the basketball game I was watching, like I just do that. And, if there's a stick to fantasy football crowd or stick to dynasty crowd, sorry.
They sure as hell don't follow me. That's for sure.
I was cracking up today when I saw Matthew Berry shouted out Steffi, and I wanted to go see what Steph's reaction was. So I see that Matthew Berry shouts out Steph, and hey, everyone go follow Steph. And then I go to Steph's page, and it's this all capitals tweet, like, it's so hot, I'm sweating all over the place. And that was, so anybody that was directed.
On a call. I'm telling you, and I'll say now, I was on a call with Lisa Ann, and we had had the FaceTime set up to have a conversation, and a fabulous human being, like a fantastic, awesome person, great businesswoman. But I had to apologize to her. I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm like getting distracted because I don't like my phone. Everyone just keeps saying Steph, and I literally don't know what's going on. So I have to shut my notifications off. I apologize. But like, it took me a while to respond because I was on that call for so while, but I was like, why is my phone freaking out?
I got a real kick out of it because, you know, people were going to your page probably expecting
and they're
to see
seeing me
something
sweating.
about the news. Yes.
That's right. I didn't know that was my last tweet. Oh my God, Dave, I forgot.
Yeah, so anyone that followed you off that post knows exactly
so
what they are getting into.
Lucky them.
But all right, back on track a little. You know, this show gets off the rails all the time, so we'll try to reel it back in a little bit.
It's been a big couple weeks. We got Dave verified. We got the Matthew Berry shout out.
Yep, absolutely.
You guys are rolling here.
It's right in time for the season. But back to what we were talking about with redraft and dynasty. Obviously, age is the biggest thing. But I'm wondering, when you're evaluating guys from a redraft standpoint and a dynasty standpoint, outside of age, is there anything else that you're really taking into consideration there?
I mean, just obviously, I think the depth chart situation. Like, I mean, there's several players. I'm thinking, specifically running backs, but it's probably true of other positions as well. That I would rather have. You know, I might rather have the backup versus the starter in a dynasty league. And of course, in a redraft league, you can't do that. But I do feel like, the drafts, and maybe this goes back to what we were saying earlier about just like that dynasty mindset, kind of taking over in redraft. I feel like several years ago, you could look at a first round of a dynasty startup or the first round of a redraft league, and there would be clear differences. And I don't know that that's the case anymore. You know, they've kind of just melded to one. Like, I mean, Derrick Henry is a first round startup pick in a lot of leagues. And 2 or 3 years ago, that would have been crazy that a player like that would have first round value. And then of course, so many young players, as we already talked about, are not only early picks in dynasty, but even in redraft as well. I mean, we saw Clyde Edwards-Helaire before he played it down was the top 5 pick this time last year. Najee Harris is pretty much locked into that second round at this point right now. So I think they're just kind of, almost melding and becoming one and the same.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think the one thing that I've kind of pointed out, and I've said this before, you know, when you're playing redraft, I think the opportunity and the situation factors in a little bit more. Where in dynasty, you're almost looking straight at the talent. Like right now, you know, Michael Gallup is third string on his own team, and in redraft that might not be that great, but you know that he's still a great dynasty target because he's going to be a free agent and he has the opportunity to be a wide receiver one, you know, within the next year. So I've always said that, you know, talent is a little bit more important in dynasty, where situation and opportunity is a little bit more important in redraft.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think it's, when it comes to dynasty, I think it's like a time of year thing as well. I mean, that rookie fever that we already talked about is really in effect from February to June, maybe July. But around this time of year, as training camps open, maybe you're going into your dynasty league and setting your lineup early, thinking about what week 1 might look like. Guys you were excited to have on your team a couple months ago, it's like, I can't start that guy. Like, yeah, I mean, I'm really glad to have Rashad Bateman on my team. I can't start him.
That's what I was about to say.
Right? Yep. Yeah, like, okay, now can I go? Can I go buy Marvin Jones? Like, is Josh Reynolds on the waiver wire? Like, what can I do for week 1? Because I can't start Rashad Bateman or a ton of these other young players. So I think it's like a mindset change all year round.
So let me ask you one other question, because you mentioned like the time of year, and I've done startups all throughout the off season. And I'm wondering, I know when my favorite time of the year is. When's your favorite time of the year to do a startup draft?
I would say probably just as early as possible in the off season. So like, I mean, January, February would be great for me. One thing I've noticed, I guess really last year was the first time I saw this, and I'm sure it happened before that, but I saw people doing startups in the middle of the year, like in the middle of the regular season doing startup drafts. I know Ray Garvin did at least one of them. He's the one that I really saw talking about it. But again, I'm sure he's not the first one to ever do that.
I also did it.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. Hey, when you get the bug, right? When you get the itch,
it's bad. It's bad.
So I haven't done one of those. I run mocks for DLF to gather ADP, and we do that year round. Including the regular season. And I had always gotten some pushback, like, why do you do drafts in season? And I always like to track the player value, and I don't want to wait until January or February to see how that's changed. So I always thought it had some value and was worthy of doing. But then to see people doing actual startups in like October was awesome.
Yeah, I love that. And, I kind of hopped into the industry like right before last season. I was doing stuff for Fantasy Pros for years, but I got on Twitter right before last offseason. So this has been my first full offseason. And I've got to say, kind of watching how the sausage is made and how ADP changes is a lot of fun. And you see that when you do those January, February, March startups. I got Ezekiel Elliott in the 5th round. I got Joe Mixon in the 6th round. People are so overreactionary when the season ends that there's some crazy values in there. But then in those same drafts, we saw James Robinson going in the 3rd round, who, it's just kind of insane to see immediately after the season. I'd say that's my favorite time as well, just because it's pure mayhem and you don't really know what to expect.
The chaos. We all love it.
So,
yeah, and now that, like I said, now that camps are opening, like Zeke's a 1st rounder again, or an early 2nd rounder. So that's it. Those things are easy to spot sometimes.
Yeah, I love it. And I will be doing all of my startups this year immediately after the season, because that is now my new favorite time to do it. But the last question I have for you is for somebody that has never been in a dynasty league before and can't find, a group of friends to get a league together. How would you recommend somebody dips their toes into the dynasty community?
Yeah, this is an easy one. One of my other responsibilities is helping out Scott Fish, who runs the Safe Leagues. He commissions over 1,000 dynasty leagues, 4 Safe Leagues, and I try to help him out with that. But that's obviously a huge job. But new leagues are opening all the time over there. Not during the regular season. Maybe that's something Scott would consider. We'll see if it was a good experience for Steph. But all throughout the off season, new leagues are starting. So check out safeleagues.com. We actually just started a new league format over there, a partnership between DLF and Safe Leagues. Those are called Ultra Flex Leagues. 10 starters. Start whoever you want. There's a cap of 2 quarterbacks. But beyond that, it's wide open. So if you want to start 2 quarterbacks and 8 tight ends, you can do that. If you want to start 10 wide receivers,
I already have an addiction, dude. Like, chill out.
like 0 running back is a real thing. You can build that team with literally 0 running backs on your roster.
You had me at 8 tight ends there.
Yeah.
Speaking of 0 running back, I loved how upset everyone got about Eric Belair's draft, where he didn't draft any running backs at all. It's like he can get guys off waivers. We've still got a long way until kickoff, but man, the reaction to that was something. People were very, very upset.
Yeah, I was surprised by that as well. I don't know.
Charity league, we're having fun.
Yeah, SFB is basically it's like one of these it's like the Millie Maker, right? It's like one of these DFS tournaments, and if you just draft according to ADP and you just kind of build the same team that anybody else could build, you're probably not going to make it to the top. So I don't know if Eric built a winner, but he at least built something different than everybody else.
Yeah, he took the contrarian approach. Well, I know you got a chance to talk about League Safe a little bit. Before we sign off here, though, I just want to give you the floor one last time to plug anything that you're working on, anything that DLF has going on, and then obviously where people can find you on social media.
Sure. Thanks again for having me. Love chatting with you guys. You can find me on Twitter at RyanMC23. And again, find all my work at dynastyleaguefootball.com. And over there, just like everybody else, we're kind of getting ready for regular season content, what that's going to look like. That's always a challenge in dynasty leagues, because you've got some people playing week by week, ready to win now, and other people are already looking ahead to 2023 or 2024. So you got to do what works for everybody and find that middle ground. But we're excited. I'm also on the DLF Dynasty podcast there, and the Commission Impossible podcast, and also on the Locked On Dynasty podcast with Matt Williamson.
Awesome. And then Steph, before we sign off, why don't you let everyone know where they can find you with your, well, same handle, but new name on Twitter.
Yes. So I am Steph Smalls. No one's going to catch on. It's fine. Steffi Smalls with 3 L's on Twitter. I am getting off the show. I'm recording with Adam Rank for my first episode. Finally, my own solo podcast is going to come out on Monday. So very excited about that. Small talk, all the usual stuff, my injury tracker, whatever you need is at FTN. And as always, thank you, Ryan. Very excited. This is a blast.
Yeah, I think I speak on behalf of the entire community when I say thank you for all the work that you've done here and the innovation. You know, it doesn't go unnoticed. And, you know, you just make this entire industry and community a much better place.
I'm telling you, I always wanted that Ryan follow. That's a big deal. Like, everyone else is fine. Matt Berry, follow me. I don't care. Why is Ryan not following me? What do I freaking do? No, listen, you'd be surprised.
Well, Steph and I, we will be back next week, same time as always, 4 p.m. Eastern time, and we will be with CBS's Jamie Eisenberg for what will be another great show. So be sure to tune into that. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Dave Kluge.
And I'm Steffi Smalls.
And thank you for tuning into our Friday show.